Hello everyone, I'm Extra Cheesy 87 and this is Let's Play Reflections for the Trails in the Sky Trilogy. So there's a couple things we have to get out of the way. First things first, I'm using a new microphone. This is the very first video I'm recording with it. I'm still working out the kinks, basically just got it set up. We're still going to have to make some changes to it. It's not as good as it could possibly be just yet. It doesn't actually fit on the stand that I bought, so I think I'm gonna have to get like a shock mount, like additional thing so that it'll fit properly. So right now we just kind of have it standing on the desk, so it's not necessarily in the best position relative to my mouth, but I think it already sounds a whole hell of a lot better, and it's only going to get no better from here. Also, this is going to be a long video, as you can probably tell, based on, the length. I don't exactly know how long this is going to be. I'm thinking it'll probably take an hour. My basic plan is to split each game into about 20-minute sections. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it all in one sitting, or if I'm going to have to take some breaks. I am equipped with coffee and water. Speaking of which, let's already take a little quick hydration break. But, yeah, I've got some talking points. This will it's gonna be, it's not a script. Oh god, I didn't write a script. But, I've got some talking points for each of the games we're gonna run through. I think for the background footage, I'm just going to, have our final boss battle. Because, I wanted something that fit the games, but I don't really have a whole lot of footage for the first two games. And I figured, let's just throw the final boss footage and maybe speed it up a little bit to, fit in the background, like the final bosses of each of the games for each section. I feel like there was one other thing I wanted to mention before I jumped right into the meat and potatoes of the video. Oh yeah, the quality for the boss fights of Trails 1 and 2 are probably going to be pretty bad because I don't have the raw video files for them anymore. I had to rip them off YouTube, and usually that results in some noticeable quality degradation. And plus, they weren't recorded at the highest quality to begin with, compared to Trails 3, which has a little bit. I did up the recording settings for Trails 3, so it looks a little bit nicer. Keyword little bit. But let's go ahead and jump in on the. We'll probably just at first just kind of talk about each of the games individually, and then I'll talk about them all collectively as a kind of wrap up. For anyone who's never watched one of these type of videos, it's a new series I've started. Where basically I talk about the games themselves, but also like in the context of having Let's Played them. They're intended to be kind of like self-reflective, like ways that I can have something to improve on in the future, like laying out what I think went well in a Let's Play and what I think didn't go well. It's not as applicable for this video because the Trails 1 and 2 Let's Plays are kind of old, and I still just want to talk about them because I kind of want to talk about the series or the trilogy as a whole. So there won't be as much as that. It will be a lot of me just talking about the games in general and my thoughts on them, and kind of also about how my opinions on some of them have changed over time. I've got some apologizing to do to Trails 1, which is what we're going to jump into right now. So, some of this will be kind of like a review if you watch the first Let's Play, but I'm just going to talk a little bit about, my introduction to the game, right? I'd never even heard of it back when it came out on the PSP. I didn't know about its existence until it got announced that it was getting ported to PC in like 2014, maybe late 2013. And like I said, I've never heard of the game, but people were like losing their minds over it. Like there was a lot of talk about how like the Trails trilogy is like one of the greatest like series of JRPGs out there. And I was like, okay, I kind of got bought into the hype. Bought it not on release, or not on the Steam release, but within like a week or a few days. Got about 6 hours in. I was enjoying it, like it seemed cool, but I just kind of stopped playing, and I don't really know. I mean, the beginning of the game's really fucking slow. That's probably the biggest problem with Trails 1, is that it's got very, very slow pacing, which is a little off-putting. And I remember I dropped the game for about 6 months, came back. I don't remember if you started from that same spot, or I think I restarted entirely. pushed through, made it to the final chapter over the course of a couple weeks. Was starting to kind of have fun with it, but it still wasn't really clicking, because basically the game doesn't get really good until the final chapter, which is exactly when I stopped. I stopped right at the beginning of the final chapter, right after Chloe gets kidnapped. And I always kind of had the intention of going back and replaying the game, or like finishing it. But after like a few days, which turned into a few weeks, which turned into a few months, and then it's like, I don't even really remember what was going on. And so I was kind of stuck in this like catch-22 of like, I don't want to restart the game because I don't want to go through the slow ass beginning again. But I don't want to jump in from where my save was because I don't remember anything that's happened and I'm not going to enjoy it as much. So I just kept putting off playing the game and the series as a whole. And then eventually, I kind of came up with the idea to Let's Play it because it was something that I wasn't completely blind. I knew I liked the game. That's like probably the biggest lesson I learned from doing this trilogy is blind Let's Plays are good, and I should do more of them. But we'll talk about that more at the end, I guess. My kind of final thoughts on the trilogy, but because basically, one of the things that I've done really well, or I'm happy with myself for, is ever since I came back from the hiatus, I've finished every series I've started. And I think I started Trails right after Final Fantasy IV, or within a couple months after Final Fantasy IV. And I was kind of under the assumption that, like, if I can finish that Let's Play, which for a little background, I hated that Let's Play. Well, the game's fine, it's just I made a mistake with the difficulty, and the hard mode is unbalanced, and I didn't even realize I picked it. I didn't even realize there were difficulties in that, because it's based on the mobile port, because the original remake version doesn't have difficulties, but it's not balanced. But that's neither here nor there. Basically, I didn't want to finish the Let's Play, but I went ahead and finished it, and so that was kind of like a sign of, like, if I can finish that, I can finish anything, so we can push through Trails 1. Like, making it a Let's Play was kind of a way to make me play the game, and it pretty much kind of worked out. I didn't have, honestly, probably, like, if I'd been playing on my own time, I maybe would have quit around like chapter 2, just because I got kind of frustrated with some of the combat, which, looking back on it, a lot of that's my own fault. Which is something I kind of want to talk about here a little bit, because I got to apologize to Trails 1. The combat, I was way too hard on it, mainly just because I was bad. Like, I went back and rewatched, I guess it's probably been a couple weeks ago now, but it was when I was first writing the bullet points for this video. I went back and, because I've always been complaining about the end of Chapter 2 boss fight, where you fight the two wolves or whatever, in the Mayor Dalmore's mansion. I had completely forgotten you had Chloe in that fight. And so, like, every time I think about it, for some reason I've been thinking it was just a Joshua Estelle fight. But you actually have Chloe, which completely balances the fight. Well, maybe not completely. The fight's still a little wonk. But, like, all you had to do was just get to max CP and then ult with Chloe and get the defense buff, and then you win. But for some reason, that never occurred to me, and so then I just kept bashing my head against the wall and flaming the game and saying that its combat is bad, which is very unfair, and I actually was, like, embarrassed rewatching the video. Because I was just bad. I don't know, some things you just don't, like, realize. That is one thing I do have a complaint about for Trails 1 and 2, is how, oh shit, I just dropped something. Oh well, it'll be fine. Is how, like, so many of the boss fights you're obligated to grind a max CP before them, which is one of the things I really liked in Trails 3, was having the little pool where you could go back and get all of your CP back at, not necessarily any time, but basically just after a few fights it would, get fixed, which is so much better, because, like, one of the things I remember that, like, that boss fight in particular, the reason it annoyed me was because, like, I think I went in with no CP on any of the characters, and the idea of, like, pausing to, like, let's go off to the seaside road and grind up CP before the boss fight at the end of the chapter. Just didn't occur. Well, even if it occurred to me, I wasn't going to do it because the way the story is positioned, right? It's like, oh man, we just learned Dalmor's evil, or he's a bad dude. You got to go arrest him before he escapes. So it just like fucks up the pacing if you're like, oh wait, I gotta go fight monsters so that I can have enough CP so I can use my ults and not die to the stupid boss fights. Because they're really balanced around you being able to use your ultimates like early on. Especially on, I guess, the higher difficulties, which maybe you shouldn't pick hard if you're not willing to do that. Lesson learned. But also lesson not learned, because I will play the what you call it, the crossbow games on the highest difficulty because I'm a masochist. And also, if there's anything I need to know, please tell me, because I'm probably gonna record those. I might start recording those today, actually. This video is gonna go up, I think, on Sunday. Today's Friday, so just in a couple days, hopefully. So if there's anything I need to know for that game, please tell me before the backlog starts getting built up. But yeah, I think I've resolved to play that game on whatever its highest difficulty is, because honestly, Trails 3 was a little easy, but we'll talk about. I'm getting ahead of myself, because something that I completely forgot to talk about in Trails 1 is why the game is I had such a hard time getting into it, which is its slow ass start. Oh my god, it's got the slowest start of like almost any game I've ever played. And Persona 4 is like my favorite game of all time, and that game doesn't even let you play it for 3 hours. It's really just like there's no story for the first like 3 chapters of the game. Because basically, you start off, you're doing your bracer thing, and you have the sky pirates / bandits, and that just kind of like, it feels a little anti-climatic. Like you're kind of strung along by this like Cassius storyline, right? Where it's like in the beginning, your impetus for caring is like, oh, the dad's being kidnapped, and at the time you're playing, you don't know that Cassius is like the most badass to ever badass. Because really, I remember thinking my initial thoughts was that it was going to be a kind of a, like, oh, you rescue Cassius, and this is like the passing of the torch, right? Like, even though Joshua and Estelle are just starting out, here they are, they're already surpassing a, qualified actual bracer, which is not the way the story ends up going. It's a little bit different, where it's actually Cassius is like this, precipice that has yet to be climbed, so to speak. That's not really the best metaphor, but I think you know what I mean, where he's like revealed to be way more important and strong than he initially seems. But so then you're kind of like, okay, well, we don't really need to care about Cassius anymore, because apparently he's a crazy badass and he's off doing his own thing. So then you're just kind of like, really, it's the Bose stuff just kind of drags, because you're not really doing it for any overarching reason. It's just, hey, go to the cities and get your qualifications. And then it does pick up a good bit in Chapter 3 when you start learning about the coup. That goes into more detail, and then you learn that, like, Richard is, a bad dude, so to speak. Oh, man. Another problem is I haven't recorded anything in, like, 2 weeks, because after I resolved to get a new microphone, I was like, well, I don't want to record any more videos with the old microphone. And so I still got to work my vocal endurance up. We're only 13 minutes in, and I'm already I feel like I need to take a break. But I might take a break after we finish talking about Trails 1 before we segue into Trails 2. Trying to think, what else is there to really talk about? The final chapter is crazy. There's so much shit happens in it, and really, I think more... I don't know, because I mean, I don't feel like the game is overly long. I feel like it's got a decent length. It's just some of the fluff of Chapter 2, like 1, 2, and 3, I think could have been cut out, make them a little bit shorter, and then keep most of Chapter 4. Like, I feel like that's all good, where you've got the coup, you learn about, the Zemurian ancient civilization, underground Grancel, you have, like, in the end of the game, they introduce, like, Ouroboros and the whole, like, there's this grand evil, society that's got all these nefarious plans, and they're doing all these bad things, and gotta stop them, which, that's more like for the second game, but well, technically you kind of already, it's heavily hinted that Chloe is like royalty, but you have that whole thing where she gets kidnapped, and like there's just so much stuff happens in the final chapter, and it's like, why couldn't maybe a little bit, well, really I think the slow burn nature of the Trails game 1 and the trilogy as a whole does benefit them. It makes them really hard to get into. Is essentially like my basic thoughts on Trails 1, and to a lesser extent Trails 2 and 3. They're also a bit of a slow start, but it's not as bad there. Another thing I should mention, one of the things that really made the Let's Play of the first game for me was the ending. Being able to have my reaction to that like live blind for the first time was very cool. It's one of the coolest moments of like, especially any Let's Plays I've done since coming back from a hiatus. The video, or like the part of the finale where you learn the professor's like evil, is very cool, and I really like to I think I rewatched it as well a few weeks ago just to kind of remind myself, right? Because like the way that scene plays out is, you know, when Estelle goes off to get the ice cream, and then Joshua's sitting there on the bench, and then the professor walks up, and I had no like inclination at all, like not even. I think that was, I don't know how heavily it is actually hinted at. It maybe is, like maybe I should have like had a better idea, but I had no idea whatsoever that the professor was evil. And when like the music like it just cuts out and they're like casually talking and there's no background music, and it's like the fucking gears in my head turn as I realize that like, oh no, he's a bad dude. I've said the word bad dude a lot, or the phrase bad dude a lot for some reason. But yeah, like the, like, it's just, there's kind of just this moment of silence, and you just hear me go like, no! And I love that. And that's it's probably my favorite moment of the Trails 1 Let's Play. Second favorite moment's probably the actual ending scene with Estelle and Joshua. Big fan of that. And which kind of segues into another point I have here, is that like I don't really like romance stuff, but I actually really maybe enjoy. I mean, I thought it was really well done in Trails 1 and 2. Mainly because it's such a slow burn. Like there's a lot of build up for it, and it feels kind of natural in a sense, compared to a lot of times like when romance stuff is like shoved into media properties, whether they be games, books, or movies. I feel like they're not necessarily all that well done, and I don't care, and please make it stop, is usually how I feel. But I did really enjoy it. Trying to think of anything else that really needs to be mentioned. One of the things that is like a kind of ongoing thing throughout the entire trilogy, right, that kind of started in Trails 1 is the reading of the dialogue. Like that was one thing that you can definitely tell there's a massive improvement from the very beginning of the Let's Play to the end. It's still not super good because I mean I'm not a voice actor, right? I don't have the ability to do unique voices and stuff like that. And plus, even if I did, I probably wouldn't. The more casualized voice acting that I do for those these games is like a necessity, because the games take so long if you read all the dialogue. And if you were to try and give like unique voices to every character, that's going to slow you down even more, and it'll destroy your voice. So I kind of do a more, like, I mean, I have like different inclinations and like tone I give to the characters, but they're not really unique voices, right? But as a whole, my ability to like read the dialogue and put some emotion into it got a lot better, and I'm fairly happy with the final scene there with Estelle and Joshua. It's definitely like, I got a lot better at it in Trails 2, and then I think also in Trails 3 I got even better. But, and I think I'm always improving in that regard. But I do think that, the trilogy as a whole really, like, made me love doing that type of stuff. Like, I get way more into the Let's Plays stories and characters when I get more into the game story and characters when I'm doing the Let's Play and, like, reading the voices and doing the dialogue. It makes some of the scenes hit a lot harder. And one, I guess, other little final thing is like the way the Let's Play was recorded, right? Like Trails 1 was for the longest time, or not for the longest time, but for a while was my longest Let's Play by like a good margin at 66 parts. And it was like basically the first 30 videos were recorded kind of slowly, and then I recorded the last 30 over like a week and a half, right at the start of, I think it was like summer break. I'm trying to remember. It would have been like May 2019 that I rushed through and played through the second half of the game, and like it was a little over a week. But I think that's gonna probably do it for Trails 1. Like, that's also because it's been a little bit longer. I don't remember as much, like, specifics of things that I wanted to talk about. But that's kind of my general thoughts on the game. Very slow start. Need to apologize on the combat. I do think the combat is the worst in Trails 1, particularly because there's not as many sections where you have 4 characters. And I feel like the combat just works a lot better when you have 4 characters, and it's more fun. But some of the more egregious fights that I've been complaining about actually aren't all that bad, and it's more just a mad because bad situation on my part. And also just so many of the fights, like, I just was so unwilling to pause and grind CP before doing boss fights, which is also, like, that is my fault, but that's kind of in the context of a Let's Play. It does kind of suck to be like, oh, wait, let's pause things here for a second and then go grind for 10 minutes before we go do the story-based boss fight. Like, I want to see what happens too, and I just kind of want to rush in and see if I can do it, which sometimes got us into trouble. Particularly, the biggest example is the end of Chapter 2 boss fight, where I got way too salty and was unfair to the game, and I'm pretty embarrassed by that video, to be honest. But I am going to take a break here for a second. The video is just going to keep going as is, but I have to rest my voice because you'd be really surprised how quickly you lose vocal endurance when you don't record for a little bit. At least in my case. Anytime I've taken off more than like a week or a week and a half of recording, my voice just like it takes a little while before it gets back up to snuff. So yeah, we'll have a small break here, and we'll come back in a second. Alright, we're back. Took a little bit of a break to rest the voice, and I think we're ready to move on to Trails 2. One little final thing I want to mention on Trails 1 from the Let's Play context that I forgot to mention is that Trails 1 represented one of the first big changes in my upload schedule, and probably the main lesson I learned from Trails 1 was that sometimes you gotta upload more when you're doing a long series, because like my initial upload schedule right when I came back from the hiatus in like early January 2018, like from January to like March-ish, like March or April 2018, I did do a video a day, but kind of got burnt out doing that because, well, I was originally doing a video a day just as kind of like a show of like, hey, I'm not gonna just come back and do a couple of videos and then disappear again. I wanted that to be like a show of, hey, I'm here to stick around, because in the past I had a problem with actually finishing series and sticking to things, and that was like one of my main things on coming back was I'm going to finish everything I start, I'm going to be consistent, I'm going to do what I need to do. But after a few months, I kind of tried to switch over to an upload schedule of it was 5 videos a week, 3 series, where it was like video Monday of Series A. I would do 3 series, so Series A, B, and C. Monday would be Series A, Tuesday would be a day off, Wednesday would be Series B, Friday would be Series A again, Saturday would be its own Let's Play that was usually like a longer video that was maybe like 45, maybe even 45 minutes to an hour. Then Sunday would be Series B, and then that would repeat. And I basically switched over to that because having a more consistent upload schedule seemed like a good idea, and also no one was watching my stuff, and I thought maybe it was because I was putting out too much content, which is maybe correct, but I think the bigger issue was just nobody wanted to watch, because I'm kind of have a general philosophy that like if people want to watch something, they'll watch it. Now I'm not saying you obviously shouldn't upload too much, like there's an upper end to how much you should upload in one day, But at the end of the day, I think getting people into a routine and having one video a day of a series like the way I currently do it now is the way that makes me, I think, the best, because it keeps Let's Plays relatively short in the sense that they won't last forever, which was kind of the problem with Trails 1, is that it lasted forever. It went from March 6th to August 1st, which is like 5 months for 60 videos. That's a long time, dude. And going forward, you know, because like Trails 3, for example, is 79 parts. It's even longer, and it only took from June 8th to September 5th. So Let's Play got finished faster. I got to, well, you know, it wasn't one of those situations where like when Trails 1 and 2 where I beat the game and then it took like 3 months for the finale to come out. It was like I beat the game and then it ended within maybe less than a month afterwards, which is kind of nice. Just because it feels kind of weird to be like stringing along a Let's Play like that where you finished it so long ago and then you're kind of like, you know, you can't do anything else because you've got all these other videos. You don't really want to start recording the next series because then the first video of that series won't go up for like 3 months. So it just kind of feels bad. And that was like one of the biggest lessons I learned of Trails 1 is, hey, maybe you could just upload more. If people want to watch it, they'll eventually watch it. And if they don't want to watch it, that's fine. You get to finish the Let's Play quicker. And then you can start playing something else that maybe they want to watch. And that's kind of my general philosophy right now. But let's go ahead and move on into Trails 2. Oh, and my voice is already starting to get tired again. It's only been 4 minutes. It's gonna take a little bit before we get back up to snuff. So let's take a hydration break. And this does kind of segue nicely into one of the first things I want to talk about in Trails 2, which was how I finished Trails 1 in early May of 2019, but didn't get to start Trails 2 until, December 16th is what I have written down, so I guess I started it a little bit before that. I completely just lost my train of thought. It's gone. It's dead, dude. But yeah, I wanted to start it right after, because Trails 1 has that, like, super cliffhanger ending. Well, it's not really a cliffhanger, but, you know, it's a very powerful ending, and you're like, oh man, I want to start the next game. And so, like, not being able to start it for, like, 6 months kind of, like, really sucked. But because, you know, I couldn't start playing it because, A, the backlog, and then I didn't, even when Trails finished, I didn't want to start it immediately. Because, I don't know, I'd just been playing Trails on the channel for like 6 months in a row. I didn't know if that was necessarily the best decision. So we ended up taking a bit of a longer break. And I started recording, I guess it was like beginning of December. I remember it was right before I ended my last semester at college. I think it was like basically during, like after I finished finals, I started recording. Or maybe that like week you're supposed to study for finals, and I didn't do that because, come on, you just take the test and hope you do well, right? I mean, it worked out for me, but that's maybe not the best strategy for most of the little boys and girls out there. But yeah, so like the very beginning of the series was kind of recorded like early December, and then I took a break for actual like Christmas break. Just because I wasn't like alone at the house, right? And I only ever record when I'm alone. But then like starting early January, over the course of like 2 weeks, recorded like 80 videos or something ridiculous like that. Or like 70-ish videos. It was pretty much like put like 8 hours a day in for 2 weeks. At least, well, like weekdays. I didn't record on, well, I didn't necessarily record every day of the weekends. But it was like, it was pretty much my job for 2 weeks. It was a lot of fun. But I remember I would just be like wiped after each day. I would go to bed early, pretty much, because like after you record for like 8 hours, like even though it's obviously not physically exerting at all, mentally you're just so fucking tired. Especially for like a game like the Trails where there's so much dialogue and you're just talking pretty much constantly throughout the entire video. You don't ever have like time to like take a breather and let the game do voice acting or something, which granted I only just learned. I guess it was someone commented on one of the Trails 3 videos talking about how there's like voice acting in one of the editions. I think it was like some remakes of the games for Vita, which I did not even know existed until that comment, and I had to look up what they were talking about. And then there's actually a patch that would have let you use that voice acting on the PC version. So I technically could have had voice acting for the Let's Play. It would have probably made the Let's Play better from a viewer perspective, in the sense that you've got actual professional voice actors reading the lines instead of me. But I think I enjoyed the game more and had more fun with it because I really like reading the dialogue. If I'm being completely honest, it's more fun for me. I feel less like I'm just kind of sitting there. Like, it engages me more and kind of makes me think of things to say, rather than just, because sometimes you can just, if you're like, a game has dialogue, it's too easy to sit back, especially if it's like a good game with a good story, it's too easy to sit back and then just like enjoy the story and not do what you're supposed to be doing as a content creator, which is adding value or adding something extra, as opposed to just, watching the game be played out with no commentary. I don't really know why I started talking about that, but I did. I've kind of completely just lost that train of thought again. Let's refer back to my notes. So yeah, I was talking about recording a lot in each day and just being like mentally wiped, because like I would pretty much I would finish recording around like 5 p.m. I would stay up for like another couple hours, and then I would like go to bed and wake up like early, and then that like kind of period before I would start recording at like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, I would like play a little, something, whatever I was playing in my free time. But yeah, so that's pretty much the way Trails 2 is recorded. It had like the largest backlog of any series outside of Persona 4. Persona 4 had an incredible backlog. I think I beat that game when like part 30 went up. Actually, maybe before, like when part 20 something went up, which was, that series still hasn't finished by the time this video goes up. It's still got like almost 30 videos, dude. It's so long. Oh, man. But so like Trails 2, just kind of, we'll talk about the story, right? Where it also kind of has a slow start like Trails 1, but it's not as bad. Mostly because you kind of like, you have the whole Joshua Ouroboros thing in the background, where like you're just constantly waiting for like that shoe to drop, and like Joshua to get brought back in. You're gonna like fully engage in the Ouroboros stuff, and so there's just kind of this tension throughout the entire game that is, that it's kind of keeps it taut. You're constantly reminded of it. You're waiting for that reunion scene, right? And so that kind of kept me going, and so I never really got bored with it, even though, like, honestly, not that much happens for the first few chapters of Trails 2. It doesn't really pick up until chapter 5, I don't think. Where it's played pretty slow. You're mainly kept interested because of, like I said, the Joshua stuff in the background, where you're constantly waiting for that to resolve itself, but also, like, just getting reunited with all the different characters, and, like, especially, like, chapter 1 is, like, really slow, because, like, the big thing you're investigating in chapter 1 is a ghost. But obviously it's not a real ghost, right? And it's definitely the least interesting of the chapters, but it's kept cool because it's like, hey, you're talking with Agate or Shara, depending on who you pick, or you're getting reunited with Oliver, you're getting reunited with Chloe, you're going back to the academy, and you're meeting all those characters. So it's like, basically, like, Trails 1 in a way kind of walked so that Trails 2 could run. Like, it just builds off of the, what Trails 1 built up in terms of its characterization and everything, like, so well. Because really, if I had to, like, think about it, like, Trails 1 basically is kind of self-contained. It builds up the individual characters, and then Trails 2 really expands the scope of the universe a lot, right? Where you have like a lot more talk about the different countries, or, Zemuria and Ouroboros and all that. So like the world building in Trails 2 is incredibly good. And something I was very impressed with. But yeah, that's kind of like, it does have a slow start though. It's not nearly as bad as Trails 1 because you're already invested into the characters and story by then, because you've put like 40 hours into the story, right? compared to like in Trails 1, where you're meeting these characters for the first time, they're not necessarily that fleshed out yet, but yeah. But Chapter 5, and particularly the Tita and Agate scene, where you kind of learn what happened to Agate's Agate's sister, like after you first fight the dragon. Like that scene is incredible. I loved it. And that's kind of like a high point of the trilogy, or one of the many high points of the trilogy. It just really kind of sticks in my mind. And that was kind of like, oh man, this game is very good. That was kind of like one of the moments, right? Another thing that made the game as a whole more enjoyable, right, is that for almost all of it, you had 4 characters to pick from, at least. Like, even when you had your characters, like, you couldn't pick from whoever you wanted, you pretty much always had at least 4, which kind of moves into one of the things that impressed me the most with Trails 2, was having such a large cast of characters and being able to pick from them at almost any time. Also, what in the fuck are you talking about, OBS? It just says encoding overloaded. It's a black screen. I'm not recording anything. It's a black screen that I'm talking over. How is the encoding overloaded? What are you talking about? Go home, you're drunk. I'm sorry. That really triggered me. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah. So, like, how you have this large cast of characters, and the way the story, like, they all have, like, unique lines of dialogue for whoever you have in the party, and some of them even, like, scenes will change. Like, for an example, you know, Zen, if you bring Zen to fight, Walter, the final Walter fight, like, they have an actual, like, fight scene that happens, and, you know, taking Cheryl into Luciola. One of my favorites was if you have Oliver in the party for that side quest in Chapter 4 revolving the drinking stuff, like the trying to cheat Ina in the drinking competition, that, like, Oliver's super involved in that side quest, and he has his own little scenes and whatnot. Like, that's incredibly cool. And it really reminds me a lot of, like, something you don't see too often in JRPGs. That's more of something that you see more in, like, Western CRPGs, where, like, who you pick to bring in your party is, like, really important, and they all have, like, dialogue and will react to the story in their own ways. Like, that's something that you don't see as much in JRPGs, and something I really enjoyed in Trails 2. And also, like, how after every section of the story, you could go back to base in the Bracer Guild, and everyone would have, like, new dialogue. That was cool. I didn't do that much of that on screen, but every once in a while, I would go, like, off screen and check out the dialogue there. And that's really cool. And it's just those, like, little details that the Trails series, I think, excels at. Especially, like, Trails 2, like, one of my favorite examples of that is when you, in Chapter 7 or 8, when you come back to Roland, when you have Joshua in the party, like, after the reunion scene, and if you talk to the wife of the shopkeeper, or, like, the weapons shop dude, and they have their own little scene where she, like, welcomes him back to the town and everything, like, that's so cool. Like, I love little details like that. And just, like, all the dialogue the town members have, right? For when Joshua comes back, where they all welcome him back and everything. It made, like, what is honestly a very tiny town feel like it had a lot of life. Which is something that a lot of video games, like, don't do that well. Which is making things feel lifelike. And it's just all comes down to those little tiny details that I think the trilogy as a whole, but especially Trails 2, I think excels at the most. Trying to think, what else is there? So as a whole, like I said, combat was better. There were still some annoyances, which it basically kind of factors into what I talked about earlier with, like, the max CP requirement, where some of the boss fights are balanced around you going into them with max CP. And it's just a pain in the ass to grind up CP before every boss fight so that you can ult instantly. The most egregious fight is probably the first Rene fight. Like when you fight her in the tower the first time. Or the Tetrasilic tower, not the in-game tower. But like when she has those little robot things, but you need to be able to ult instantly and kill them, or else they'll, like, petrify and destroy you with status effects. Like, that's really annoying. But for the most part, combat was a lot better. There weren't as many annoyances. There was the Rene fight, the Luciola fight at the end of the game that just tilted me off the fucking planet. That's probably the maddest I got in the Trails series, to be either that or the Palm at the end of Trails 3. Luciola, I think I got more angry, but I deleted the footage because I was so fucking mad. I didn't include it into the actual final video. Whereas the Palm stuff, I didn't cut that much out. I kept the most ragey moments in. Whereas Luciola, the most ragey moments were like, I don't even really remember them, but I remember being so embarrassed after the fact at how mad I was getting that I'm like, I can't show this to anyone. This isn't even fun. Because like, rage is one of those things where like, a tiny bit of it is funny. Like a lot of it is kind of like weird. It's like, I don't know. And then like a lot of it is kind of funny again because it crosses over into like absurdity. And then like an extreme amount of rage is just like cringy and it makes you feel bad. So it's kind of this nice balancing act of like, when it comes to situations where I get salty of like, how much do I leave in and how much do I take out, and trying to manage my own rage. Because usually I do play it up a tiny amount when I'm recording. Like I'm a bit more vocal about it than I would be normally. Like normally if I get mad at a game, it's just like quiet, simmering anger. But in the Let's Play, you kind of want to show off your own emotions a little bit more, which does make it seem like I get more salty than I actually do. But another point to kind of talk about is like also the quote-unquote, I'm using air quotes here, voice acting that I do for the game. Like, I think it got a lot better in Trails 2. I was very happy with the way the reunion scene with Joshua and Estelle on the beach was handled. But definitely, I think the best example of that was probably the border dispute on, like, part 80, whatever. I think it's 84, if I remember correctly. The thing with Oliver and Chloe. Where, like, that was super fucking taxing, because it's like 30 minutes of extended high energy dialogue, like back and forth, and it was at the end of a recording session. I remember like while doing it, I wanted to die. My voice was like just going out, but being able to push through, and I felt like the video, I mean, I haven't watched it since I edited it like almost close to a year ago. Well, it's not having been close to a year. It's been like 6 months probably. Or, no, more than 6 months, like 7 or 8 months. But I remember liking it. Now, maybe it hasn't aged as well as I think it has. Maybe it's not as good. It's always kind of hard to judge your own content, so to speak. But as a whole, I do think the voice acting / reading the dialogue got a lot better. And I'm pretty happy with the Trails 2 Let's Play as a whole. The only really major, it's just kind of the problems all my videos have, like audio quality, right? Which is why I've gotten this new mic, which we're still working out the kinks, right? It's not going to be as good as it can be yet. Especially because like I don't have it in an actual stand. And I'm also someone who moves a little bit too much. Like I'm going to have to get used to staying in a more stationary position and not like moving away from the mic like I did just now, just to kind of represent what I'm talking about. Because if you move away, right, it gets like quieter. If you move too close, then it's too loud. So I need to find a better like stationary position. And I'm kind of a mobile person when it comes to recording and stuff like that. But I think we'll go ahead and probably end the Trails 2 section. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. There are other final thoughts. You know, the longest Let's Play I've done... Actually, no, it's not the longest Let's Play I've ever done. Persona 4 is, but it hasn't... Persona 4 hasn't yet surpassed Trails 2. It will. It's like 113 parts, I think. 114, something like that. Whereas Trails 2 is only 96. But, at the time, 96 parts was like, holy shit. And it's still a lot. But, yeah, I think probably the biggest, like, things that I loved about Trails 2, like, the slow build-up, the way it just capitalized on everything Trails 1 did to take, like, the fairly insular story and narrative of Trails 1 and then expand it so much, like, with its world building and everything, was really cool. Like, basically just the power of the slow build-up, especially when it came to, like, the character relationships, especially Estelle and Joshua, where you know, you have all that build up in Trails 1, plus there's not a lot of direct interaction with them in Trails 2, at least until the end. But, you know, especially there's a lot of scenes where Estelle kind of thinks about her relationship with Joshua and things like that. It makes it a lot more, like, compelling. And when that reunion actually happens, it's pretty impactful because of it. And so, like, I think that's just having this such a long story and being able to take its time and do everything it wants to do is really cool and unique, and something that I really, really love. But I think we're going to take another small break, and then we're going to move on into Trails 3, and maybe we'll also do the final thoughts. I don't think I have as much to say about Trails 3. I'll have to think a little bit, but I gotta stop. Voice is rebelling. It doesn't want to talk anymore. Alright, so we're back and ready to move on to the Trails 3 portion of the video. Trying to think of anything else that I wanted to mention to wrap up Trails 2. I don't think so. I think we said almost everything that I remembered that I wanted to say. So Trails 3 was kind of a weird one, right? Going in, because it's not, well, it ended up being a little bit more of a direct sequel to Trails 2 than I really thought it was going to be. Like, going in, I thought Trails 3 was going to be, like, complete side story. Like, it was just going to be about Kevin and Riez doing, well, I didn't know who Riez was, but, you know, Kevin doing stuff. I didn't realize that the setup for the game was essentially you're in like an endless dungeon and it's kind of like a reunion with all the characters. Like, I didn't know about the star doors and the side stories. I didn't know that basically every major character from the last two games was in it as a playable character. Well, maybe not every major, but almost every major character was pretty much a playable character, which is really cool in retrospect. Like, and then when I kind of learned that, then I kind of, like, my perception shifted to, like, oh, this is I don't mean this, like, word to mean, like, not divisive, what's the word, dismissive? Like, oh, it's like a fan service game. It's like, oh, you get to have all the characters in this dungeon and, you know, get to use them out, and it's kind of like this big reunion. I was still digging it, but I think what really pushed Trails 3 over the edge for me, and, like, made it not feel like it was just a side story game, kind of like a, like, really, even though this game came first, but it reminded me a lot of the Persona Q games, which are very much kind of a similar idea, where it's like, hey, let's take all the games from, well, the first one's just Persona, I think the second one has Persona 5 characters as well. I've never played the second one, I've only played the first one. But, you know, Persona Q has, like, all the characters from Persona 3 and 4, and they're in this, like, dungeon, and you kind of have, it's very, like, heavy on the fan service, right? Which is cool. I mean, I like it. I dig it. I know fan service kind of has, like, a connotation as being a bad thing, but I'm usually for it, in all honesty, as long as the game is honest about it. But really, Trails 3 kind of went beyond that with some of the Star Doors, which are definitely the high points of the series, not the series, but the high point of the game for me. That, and actually, the story did get really cool and interesting at the end, or at least some of the parts. Like, kind of getting ahead of myself here in my talking points, but the Chapter 7 reveal with Kevin, where they're talking at Astor House, that's a high point of the entire trilogy for me. That's one of my favorite, like, extended dialogue sections, where you learn, like, the full extent of his backstory, and then the reveal that Rufina is, well, it's not really Rufina, but, like, the ghost of Rufina, or the recreation of her however the hell that's supposed to actually make sense. Because honestly, I didn't expect that at all. Like, I went in, I was really thinking it was going to be like a situation where it was Wiseman, like, because he died at the same time as the Oriel, that he had been absorbed by it or something, or that because it had fused with him. I thought that's what was kind of going to happen there. And they did bring Wiseman back at the end of the game, right? Like, for the final boss of the Hell's, of the Gehenna. So, like, that kind of happened, but it wasn't, you know, he wasn't the actual final big bad, which is good, because I think that would have been a little lame if they just reused the final boss of Trails 2 to be the final boss of Trails 3. I'm glad they did something different. even if I feel like it didn't 100% make sense, I was able to roll with it. But I do think that whole scene where you learn about like his mom and everything, and you know, how Rufina died, was really well done. And so like in the end, I ended up getting invested in it. But Trails 3 does kind of have that same problem that I talked about in all the other two games. One second. God, I had a cough like sneak up on me. Was like, oh yeah, because they have a slow start. Trails 3 is pretty similar, especially at the start before you start getting all the characters added and before you start unlocking a lot of the doors. Because really, I don't think I started to get into the game until Closed Star Door, which I think was like part 18 for us or so. So like a good few hours in. That was like the first really good side story, I think. I think it's like, what, Star Door number 2 or 3? It's like one of the first few, too. But it's really good, that like extended epilogue for Trails 2, because that was really the only thing that I didn't... Like, Trails 2 just kind of ends pretty suddenly, right? Where, you know, the Liber arc collapses, they get saved by Cassius on the back of the Dragon Man, or the Dragon Boyo, and then you kind of have that nice little wrap-up scene where they're back in Hamel, and then the game ends, right? You don't really get that extended epilogue that like Trails 1 had, that I thought was so cool, where you can walk around the entire city of Grantil and talk to everyone, and all the people have dialogue, and then of course the actual final cliffhanger thing and reveal with Joshua and Ouroboros. But that was really nice, like that Star Door, I think, and plus it kind of like tied up Chloe and Joshua's little character arc together, I thought, and set up Joshua and Estelle leaving to go tour the continent pretty well. Some others, since I've just kind of listed some of the other doors that I really liked, off the top of my head, well, not really off the top of my head, I have them written down, but the ones that stuck most in my memory of like the good side stories, Closed Star Door, the one I was just talking about. Her Moon Door is also really good, mainly just because it's so long. It's so long. I mean, it felt like it could be like a freaking movie. It was like it also does take me longer because, you know, reading all the dialogue, it would obviously go a lot quicker if you're just reading it on your own. Because, you know, you can read stuff faster than you can say it out loud. But, like, her Moon Door, I mean, it felt like a little mini movie, dude. It was very detailed. The Joshua and Estelle Moon Door, that's probably my favorite side story. Mainly just because, as I kind of mentioned in the video, like, it just got me, dude. It fucking, I lowered my guard, and it got me. It hit me right in the emotional center. I really liked Oliver's Star Door, the thing with the Chancellor, like kind of setting up the whole Erebonia stuff that's gonna, I guess, happen in future games. I guess that's like the Cold Steel games, right? You know, the kind of dichotomy between him and the Chancellor is really interesting. Getting introduced to the Chancellor finally after he's kind of like, you know, he's mentioned a little bit in Trails 2 as this like ominous super figure, and so finally getting to see a bit more of him was really cool. Shara's Moon Door was also, it's a little too long, but I did really like the part that shows her backstory, right? Because it's a big difference between like just, yeah, they do mention in Trails 2 that she grew up in the slums, right? But actually having that like kind of scene where you learn like the actual reality of it, it makes it just hit a lot harder. Another example of that is probably the best Star Door is definitely Renee's. You know, getting the full, like, learning exactly what happened to her it's definitely the most, like, disturbing of the side stories and of the backstories. It's, I mean, as I kind of mentioned in the video, right, it just made me... Also, I guess I should mention this because someone got mad at me in the comments on that video that apparently you don't say her name like Renee, it's just pronounced Rin. My bad. I don't really... Like, the only reason I bring it up is because A, the comment was phrased in a really aggressive way, and that's what kind of made me mad about it, is instead of just saying, hey, by the way, you're pronouncing Renee's name wrong. It was, this video is actually unwatchable because you keep saying her name wrong. It's just pronounced Rin. There's nothing extra. It was something along those lines. And it's like, why can people sometimes not know how to say stuff on the internet? Like, if you just phrased it in a slightly different way, it would have been like, oh my god, I can't believe I've been saying this character's name the whole wrong for all these videos. And instead, it's like, it's a game with no natural voice acting. I mean, of course, I'm gonna occasionally mispronounce stuff. Like, you should have told me, I don't know, 100 videos ago when the character got introduced. But yeah, so I guess I should start saying her name correctly. I don't know why there's an extra NE if it's just pronounced Rin, but whatever. But granted, also because that comment kind of annoyed me, it makes me want to just keep saying Renee. Because forgot what I was gonna say. But yeah, so like Rin's Stardor. At least I'm guessing it's Rin. I'm just taking. Well, there is the only. It wouldn't annoy me so much if the game. I mean, the game does have voice acting right in that one version, and there is technically a line when you select her as a character in Trails 3 where she'll say something like "Rin is ready" or something. But like, it's a random voice line that doesn't always play, and you could just think of that as her, I don't know, not saying her full name. I don't know. But I'll try and make the effort to say Rin from now on. It'll take a while because I did do like 100 videos saying her name is Renee. But right, else what I was going to say. But yeah, like that Stardor is incredibly good. Like it just disturbed the hell out of me, which is the point, right? Like, I think, and it made me like way more invested in her character because it went into that detail. Like, there's a significant difference in like getting to see the reality of what she went through, and then just being told like, hey, she was basically like a. I can't remember to what extent they go into it in Trails 2. I know they kind of imply that she was essentially like a child slave, but I don't know if they really go into the other aspects of it. But yeah, basically the Star Doors and Moon Doors and everything were very good. Pretty much made the game for me, because otherwise I don't think the story is all that good. It just takes it eventually gets good, but it's such a slow burn, and you're just kind of going through this dungeon. Like, you don't even have the world building aspect of like Trails 1 where like, oh, you're going to, because it was also like a slow start, right, as I talked about earlier. But you're like going to new towns and you're meeting new characters and stuff, whereas in Trails 3 you're just meeting old characters and you're going through a kind of not super interesting dungeon, like environmentally speaking. Like, some of the areas are cool, right? Like, or well designed. Like, I like the Gold Road and the Silver Road as like a design standpoint of making multiple parties. The final dungeon's incredibly good. I'm trying to think, what was the Chapter 6, where you have all the different little mini dungeons that you have to take the specific characters to, which is one of the other things that I really liked about Trails 3, was the way it like forced/encouraged you to use almost all the characters at different points in the game, either just through having to use them for different like star doors or to unlock their door stuff. Certain sections would make you use them, like in Chapter 6, or the end of the game where you have to use all the characters. Because that's something that like I really like in games, is where it actually like makes it feel like all the characters are important and that you're actually using them. Because that is always one of the things people make fun of, and like, it's not just a JRPG problem, it's like in any type of party-based game where you can't use the entire party at once, where it's like, oh, these 4 characters are fighting, everyone else is just kind of standing around watching, you know? It does just feel a little weird. But so I do like that the final dungeon, it went like full Final Fantasy VI and made you use the entire party. Big fan of that. The one criticism with that is that I do wish... This is probably more on me than the game, is that like I didn't really realize that the equipment wasn't shared. Like, I was kind of thinking that after each wing of the final dungeon was completed, it would give you a chance to like re-equip from your full party. which is not exactly how it went, because it still made you do those boss fights after you went into the final boss room, or before you could fight the actual final boss. So I would have liked shared equipment in that sense, because like trying to equip everyone with scraps was a little annoying, because you just don't get quite enough ornaments and money and everything to equip all like 16 characters, like getting everyone up to top condition. But the final fights do feel like they're balanced in the sense that you weren't expected to be at max power. Like the game was pretty easy as a whole. Granted, that's also partially just because I understood more of the intricacies of the combat system for the most part. And really, the only times we struggled in Trails 3 were generally just due to stubbornness. The only fights that I remember being really hard, or like annoying, were the agate fight in that one side story with the ravens. That was basically just me being stubborn and not grinding for CP. If I would have just grinded for CP, we could have won fairly easily, but I was just stubborn and didn't want to restart the fight and do the cutscene over again. And then the Palm, which was me trying to make a party that wasn't that good work. When I did eventually give up and just go get Richard, we won instantly, so that wasn't like a hard fight. I think it's still kind of poorly designed, but it's not all that difficult. I'm trying to think if there was any other. I feel like there's one other fight that annoyed me. But for the most part, Trails 3 was a lot easier. Now, granted, I think that's partially just because it got rid of the issue where you always had max CP going into boss fights because of the spring, or you almost always, because boss fights are very clearly choreographed, and it was not a big deal to just teleport back to base for like a few seconds, drink the water, and come back. So, in that sense, it was a lot easier. And then also, I didn't really use Kevin at all in Trails 2, and his ult is incredibly strong. I should have used him more. He's so good, dude. Which is kind of why I think for the crossbow games, I'm gonna bump up the difficulty. It's not a smart decision. Oh, it's absolutely not a smart decision. Will I regret it? Absolutely, I'll regret it. But at the end of the day, I'll feel nice and warm on the inside, because really we probably should have played Trails 3 on the highest difficulty instead of just normal hard. But I don't think there was anything else really. The ending is really good. It like conclusively wrapped up the trilogy very well, and it also like did a good job of setting the stage for the future like games, you know, where it really like kind of brought home that it felt like this is like an extended universe type thing. But you know, the way it's set up, where like all the characters like say goodbye and they say their final piece, and you get an idea of where they're going to, or what they're going to be doing in the future, was really well done. I really liked the development of Kevin and Ria's, but mostly Kevin's character. Like I wasn't like a huge fan of him in Trails 2, but like, I mean, he's a really likable character with a lot of depth to him by the end of Trails 3, which was pretty cool. Definitely, you know, that's a goal of a story and character-based game, is to have a good protagonist. But I'm trying to think if there was anything else. You know, it had some I'm trying to think just from an LP context. Probably the biggest issue was just audio quality again. One of the most annoying things that I was never fully able to fix was, you may have noticed throughout, there was this weird kind of click/pop sound that would come up every once in a while. It took me forever to figure out what this sound was. It was my headphone wire bumping into shit. Because I got new headphones, I guess, back in like October? No, not October. What's the month after February? March? Like March, April-ish? And they have like the headphone wire is like a lot longer, and it would keep bumping up against the desk, or like the side of my chair. and it would make that weird noise, and it was just loud enough that it would not, like, I couldn't reasonably catch it with a noise gate. I did eventually figure out a way to kind of, like, minimize it, but it was super annoying, and like Persona 4 got hit by it hard because I don't think I realized what that sound was until the very end of the Let's Play, and I didn't really come up with a way to fully fix it well, not fully fix it, but like minimize it a lot more until like the second half of Trails 3. But yeah, that was probably like one of the major things that just annoyed the shit out of me anytime I would like listen to the videos, is that there's that little that just noise. But hopefully now we'll have other issues to deal with this mic. Like I've kind of, this is basically like an extended audio test as well. I've already kind of identified a few little issues that I want to try and start fixing just in this one little recording session with the current mic. Just messing with sliders and settings and making sure that some things are not being picked up that are currently being picked up, and also not bumping my desk, especially while it's still in the standing, while it's not in an actual stand, it's just sitting on my desk, which is not the most preferable way to do it, especially because like my desk is so tiny that I can't even like use my keyboard right now while it's sitting on there. I'm pretty much relegated to like controller games. I'll probably have to play the beginning of Trails 0 with a controller, which will feel a little weird, just because I can't really use my keyboard right now while I'm recording. But I guess we're definitely over an hour at this point. So final thoughts on the trilogy. I kind of mentioned this a little bit in the beginning, but like the biggest recurring, like the big overall lesson from the trilogy is blind Let's Plays are what I want to do from now on. I was very apprehensive over them for the longest time, for a few different reasons. One, if you go into a game blind, like you never know if you're going to like a game, right? And so the idea of starting a Let's Play of a game and then maybe realizing like 10 hours in that, yo, I'm just not having a good time, like this isn't really for me. And because I was so committed to like, if I start a Let's Play, I'm going to finish it, that kind of sounded like that. Just the idea of getting stuck in a Let's Play of a game that I didn't really like and then having to finish it out of a sense of like personal responsibility, like scared me. So I was just very apprehensive of doing it, especially because, like, I think it was something that I carried over from when I was originally doing Let's Plays years and years ago, just because I had a problem with finishing games. Just due to the fact that I couldn't consistently record was probably the biggest reason. And also I just wasn't as dedicated to, like, it was harder for me to pick up a game if I hadn't played it for a few days than it is now. Like, now I'm a lot better about being able to take a break from a game and jump back in for the most part. And it also helps in like in the Let's Play context where you can just like rewatch the last few, like kind of skim through the videos to kind of get an idea of the story and stuff and get refamiliarized with what's going on if you jump in after you've been away for like a week or two, which is not something you can really do normally when you're playing through a game. But I think being able to capture some of the moments of the trilogy, like my initial reactions, made it so much more compelling and fun for me personally. Like the biggest example of that is the Trails 1, the ending, right? Where you have the reveal with Joshua and the professor and everything, but also some scenes in Trails 2 and 3. Like getting those honest, genuine reactions, I think make the Let's Plays a lot better. And so from now on, I will be focusing a lot more on blind Let's Plays. Now there are sometimes you just want to play a game that you really like and you want to play it, but I think I have kind of learned to really enjoy blind Let's Plays and not be quite so scared of doing them, just because I think in general they're a better product and the benefit outweighs the potential risk of getting stuck into a game that you don't really like. And you know what, maybe if you push through, you'll learn to like the game. Kind of like what I was with Trails 1, where doing it as a Let's Play forced me to finish the game, and then I really fell in love with it and the trilogy, and you know, I'm got this drive to push through and play the rest of the games in the series as a whole. That's kind of like my final thoughts. It's a truly incredible trilogy. It's probably one of my favorite. I really don't know of that many. I mean, there's not that many like trilogies that are kind of like it, where you have this like all the games kind of connect to each other, right? Like a lot of the times, especially I think like games in general, they have a tendency to like make games like self-contained, right, and not necessarily be direct sequels. Which, granted, Trails 3 isn't a direct. I mean, it is and it isn't a direct sequel, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily continue the story of Trails 2, but everything that happens in it references the prior two games, right? Like, if you were to just start playing Trails 3 without playing Trails 1 or 2, you would be completely fucking lost. Like, and it wouldn't have any impact whatsoever because you don't know anything about these characters, right? And so that's something that I just really love. I love extended, long stories like that. And I just feel like there's not too many examples of that in a lot of media, but especially I think in the gaming sphere. I feel like there's just like there's a lot of push to make games more standalone and not necessarily like continuous, which I mean I get it, right? I get the reasoning behind it. You want people to be able to pick up your new product without as much investment. You don't want to say like, hey, before you can understand blah 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 2, you need to spend 40 hours on the first game, and the first game maybe it's not as good because we hadn't learned things and stuff like that. I don't know. That's kind of a topic for another time, and I don't fully have my thoughts developed, so instead of rambling about that, we'll probably go ahead and bring it to a close. You know, final thoughts. Incredible trilogy. I really loved it, really invigorated my love for Let's Playing. I'm really looking forward to playing through the rest of the series and seeing how it goes from here, how it grows and develops. I'm really happy that people actually kind of started to tune in and watch these videos, and I hope you'll continue to enjoy them. And yeah, I'm Extra Cheesy 87. Stay tuned for the next Let's Play. Goodbye, guys.